Alright, so my book is Percy Jackson, The Last Olympian, book 5. And then, so the first two chapters was about how. The first two chapters was about how Kronos, which is Luke, but like Luke turned into Kronos, and Percy and Beckendorf were all fighting on a ship. It was Percy and Beckendorf versus Luke, right? So then they were both on a ship, and then they were all on a ship, and then when they were done fighting, the ship exploded, and then Beckendorf died, but then Percy was still alive. Percy and Luke were still alive, and then when Percy came back to the camp with bad news, he most of the people left. Half the people left the camp, and most of the people hated him. Besides Annabeth and Chiron, which were still on his side. All right.
Are there any characters that you don't like?
I don't like Kronos because, well, he's the enemy, and I don't really like enemies and like types of books. So then, yeah.
Where's the microphone? Where's the microphone? What was your initial reaction to the book?
Since I read the first 4, then I like. My initial reaction was that I did not know for a fact that Beckendorf was gonna die, and I was kind of upset because he was a very good demigod, and he was a very good duo with Percy.
Oh wait. No. Alright, so my book was The Sword of Summer, Magnus Chase. And my book was about a kid that woke up in the middle of the streets, homeless in Boston, and some guy walked up to him saying that and this guy was dangerous according to his mother. So yeah, wait.
So my book was Percy Jackson, the Lightning Thief, and throughout the story, Percy Jackson had a difficult life. He has been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and dyslexia, and he has been expelled from several schools, once for firing a cannon during a field trip. And Percy and his best friend Grover are on the way to another field trip when Rick reorders the Lightning Thief begins. When Percy gets into trouble on the trip, his teacher, Mrs. Dodds, takes him aside. When they are alone, Mrs. Dodds turns into a gigantic leathery creature and attacks him. Percy's wheelchair-bound Latin teacher, Mr. Bruner, tosses a pen to him. In Percy's hand, the pen turns into a sword, and he defeats his monstrous teacher. However, when Percy returns to class, no one else claims to have any memory of Mrs. Dodds. Their teacher is Mrs. Kerr, whom Percy now meets. Percy is expelled from the school as he leaves. Mr. Bruner claims that it will be for the best. Before he can return home from upstate New York, Percy sees 3 monsters holding a ball of string. They cut the string in half. When Percy mentions this, Grover rushes him onto the bus. Along the way, he claims that he is meant to protect Percy, which is ironic because Percy usually considers himself Grover's defender. Nevertheless, Grover makes Percy promise to stick by him. However, when Grover stops to use the washroom, Percy sets off on his own.
My book was a night. It's about Jewish try to get rid of Germans' control during World War II. In that, everything is inverted, every value destroyed. There are no fathers, no brothers, no friends. Everyone lives and dies for himself alone.
Did you start? Oh, okay. Magnus finds. So the person that found Magnus was his uncle Randolph, and his intentions were to tell Magnus about his mother. So Magnus breaks into his house, and he found historical stuff and historical treasures. When Magnus finds out about when Randolph finds out about Magnus in his house, he tells the boy that he's in danger. He goes with Randolph to an old bridge, and there Randolph tells Magnus that he's a son of a Norse god. When he's on the bridge, Magnus and Randolph can see explosions near his house. Randolph urges the boy to pull an old sword that lies on the bottom of the river using his mind. As a surprise, it actually works. Suddenly, a black fire giant named Surt appears and wants the sword, and the two battles. Surt unleashes an intense heat and it melts most of Magnus, but Magnus finds he is unaffected by it. He stabs Surt and the two fall into the river together. Magnus dies and wakes and finds himself waking up in a hotel in Valhalla. He remembers having to learn that Valhalla is a place where heroes who die in honor live there. Magnus then learns that thousands of dead warriors live in Valhalla, and the hotel contains 540 doors and 9 worlds. A Valkyrie named Samurai, or Sam, comes to visit Magnus. She takes him to a dining hall, which is filled with Anahar. I don't know how to say that word. Tells him the empty spot at the head of the table is the god of Odin. Wait, pause it.
So when Percy, Annabeth, and Chiron meet, he mentions about the great prophecy, which is the hero London will make a choice to ensure the ultimate success or destruction of Olympus. And Rick Riordan later in the novel, he says, he basically explains that it's Luke that's gonna do it. So Percy goes on a journey with Nico D'Angelo, which is the son of Hades, so he could learn about Luke's background so they could destroy him. So they visit Luke's mom, which she lost her touch with reality, and she is mortal, but she has a gift of prophecy, and she tried to take the role of the new Oracle of Delphi, but she was cursed. Then they visit Central Park, which is a passage in the underworld, and then they meet up with Grover, which was in The Lightning Thief, and then a satyr and Percy's best friend. Then Grover becomes instrumental for helping them with the war. And then Percy meets his fellow demigods at the Empire State Building, and their main objective is to keep the Titans away from Mountain Olympus. So then Percy, Annabeth, Grover, and Thalia finally go to Mountain Olympus so they could defend it. And then Kronos starts to fight them. And then after all the war, Luke fulfills the prophecy, so then he could destroy Mount Olympus.